Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Hello there, in Focus of Liberia land. Today we have a very interesting program for you. We are expecting our expert in public governance to join us from Monrovia, Liberia. But here in studio we have with us Dr. George Y. Williams. He also is in Liberia today. Dr. George, welcome. Welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eastman. I'm back in the U.S. Came in yesterday.
So you're back. So he has all the fresh information for us ready. And we also have with us Bokai Dukle. Hello, Mr. Dukle. How are you today?
Thank you, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And we have with us our young scholar and Dr. Clarence Pearson with us today. How are you, Doc?
Thank you, Mr. Eastman. It's a pleasure to be on the show tonight. I want to say hi to all the people in Liberia and my fellow panelists, and I look forward to a great conversation today.
Okay. Now, folks, before we get started, we ask all of you to share the show because we want it to be everybody to enjoy the show today. So we ask all of you to share the show on your media networks so that more people will be able to benefit from our discussion today. All right. That being said, we're going to jump straight into it. Our topic today is public sector governance, and with focus on governance, governance as observed by our expert on the ground, Ahmed Sirleaf. He is also FOL governance advisor. So we'll be treating 5 basic questions. And the first one is, what is public sector governance? All right. Please, let me put that question out to you, Dr. Williams. What is this talk? They've been talking public sector governance for everybody to understand. Break it down to us. What is public sector governance?
Well, public sector government. Thanks, Mr. Eastman. Welcome to all our guests and panelists with us. Public sector governance encompasses the legitimate, accountable, and transparency in administering public institutions, so much so that rule of law, protection of human rights, and the efficient delivery of public services is done effectively and equitably across society. In a nutshell, distributing or providing, delivering public services in ways that benefit the greatest number in our population, not to the exclusion of the minority, but ensuring that everyone benefits at the best possible measure.
Excellent. And Dr. Ducle, let me come to you. One definition of public service, public sector governance, refers to the frameworks, processes, and practices used to direct and control public sector organizations in the delivery of public services, as Dr. Williams was saying, and the management of public resources. It ensures accountability, transparency, integrity, and effectiveness in government institutions. So, Dr. Duke, how do you think we measure up there?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this question of governance, instead of even limiting it to public sector, I mean, governance as a whole is one that referred to the entire system of public service, and that include everything, and I mean everything, ranging from elementary school in Zozo to the traffic lights in Monrovia, to revenue collectors, to the hospitals. So, like Dr. Williams said earlier, it's the systems, rules that govern how all of these systems work efficiently to benefit its citizens. Now, in doing that, I thought there were two key elements that I thought are crucial in defining what public sector governance means, which is managing the resources, to stretch your resources so that it can benefit everybody, as well as being accountable for what you've been given as a task. And I think if you really look at the breakdown of the governance, the public sector governance, if you look at it and how it is expected to function in our country today, I think the national government of Liberia will have an F in almost every area of public sector governance.
Okay, Dr. Kear, and welcome, Dr. Ahmed. Can you hear us now? Are we getting through? Ahmed, can you hear us? And can you speak so we can hear you? Okay. It seems we still have an audio problem. So I would temporarily remove you until we get that fixed. Okay. All right. Okay, Dr. Pearson. Let's try to go down the list here so we can begin to articulate and assess how public sector governance is effective in Liberia. One of the principal things that highlights off is accountability, holding officials and institutions responsible for their action and performance. And next to that is transparency, making information available and accessible to the public to promote openness and trust. On those two counts, how do you think we're doing?
Thank you, Mr. Eastman, and thank you for that question. Again, I want to say hi to our people in Liberia if we are on Kear Radio. I want to just go back a little bit before answering that question. For those who are listening from Liberia, one of the things that we tell people a lot of the time is that if you want to know a counterfeit, you need to know the real dollar. It's important for us to just mention that, when we're talking about public sector governance, we're talking about any institutions in government or in the country that is run by the government. So like if you get Celcom, if you get Lone Star, if you get Firestone, you get ArcelorMittal, those are private sector structure. So anything that is not owned by any private person or individual, but run by our country, by the people we elect, by the people the presidents appoint, those are part of our governance structure. And the word governance means to rule, to lead, and to direct where the country is going. And so to do that successfully, to understand what governance is, we got to understand all of the different laws that govern our country, whether it be the Constitution down to different statutory laws. Then we come down to how governance is done through policies that we formulate and procedures to help make our laws functional. And then we come down to people who put in place to implement those policies and procedures and protect those laws that we have, from the president to the judges to the legislators. So all of them come together, and the things they do in the offices they create and open are all part of our governance structure. With that being said, Eastman, it's sad for me to say this, but we have to speak the fact that in Liberia right now, I think we are having a serious problem with capacity, and it has been for a long time. And that word capacity is overstressed. I must admit, we use that word too many times. So what it means to our common people in Liberia is that we got people in the country, we got people who got in the government to work, but majority of the time people are there and they actually don't know what they're doing, or they're doing their own thing. They are not following what we put in place for them to do to make the country run properly. And let me give some example. For governance to work properly, like Mr. Eastman is talking about, you need to have who making the decisions. You need to know that. And when you say who make the decisions, who calling the shots, who giving direction to where the country is going, who can say this is what we're going to do and this is what we cannot do. They need to understand that there are limits to who can call the shots. But right now, as I see Mr. Eastman in Liberia, everybody calling shots, everybody doing their own thing. There is no central leadership or direction from the president to say, this is where we're going. I think the rest agenda should be the one to formulate that framework over where everybody gets that direction from. But I can assure you, the fact that they are not reporting against that framework, that they are not telling us what they're doing against that framework, everybody doing what makes them feel better for political score. And another thing is that not just who making the decision, we need to know who carries out those decisions. So one group must be making the decisions, another group must be carrying out the decision for governance to work properly. And those who are carrying out the decision might not necessarily be the ones that are making the decision. So the ones that are making the decision are the ones in the high up, the top level leadership. The ones that are carrying it out are those who are given responsibility to implement. And then there should be those who are making people to account for what they say they are doing. If we don't have those three distinctions clearly defined, and people understand where they fit and what they are supposed to be doing, then it goes back to your question you just asked me. We're doing miserably when it comes to how we are governing our country, because I think these three things are not clearly defined.
Thank you. So, my people, let we try to make it. We say that public governance is all those institutions that belong to the government and how they are run. If it's working for the Liberian people or it's not. We're talking about water and sewer. We're talking about LEC. We're talking about public health. We're talking about environmental control. All those things that the government supposed to be overseeing. We're trying to assess if they're doing the right thing. And yeah, my peer here, Dr. Pearson has just said that we're not holding up to accountability and transparency because we don't even know all the things they're doing. So I'm going to go to Dr. Williams here now. What about the rule of law and the responsiveness of our institution. How you think we fare when it comes to we applying the rule of law as it should?
So just before I respond to the rule of law question, I'd like to piggyback on what Dr. Pearson just mentioned, and I totally agree with you, Dr. Pearson. At all levels of government, there is a huge capacity gap, and the few individuals that are there with the capacity are overstretched. They're overstretched. Closely tied to that is the whole idea of this coordination between agencies of governments and in the delivery of public services within the framework of what's the government's plan of development plan. There's a lack of coordination in that. You look at simple things like even communications at the level of governments. There's a level of discoordination that is, in my mind, hurting the government more than helping. Everyone is a PR for the government, which should be the case, but not everyone has the responsibility or should be given the responsibility to convey government's programs and actions, because there's one institution, maybe two, at the very best, three institutions of government that are authorized to speak on behalf of government. So when you have various functionaries of government speaking to one issue, the level of this coordination breeds some of the misinformation, breeds the anxieties, breeds the dismal understanding of some of the issues that are going on in government. All right. And so capacity is a major issue in the country. Now, since taking over, since the war, I would say, since President Sirleaf came into being in 2006, there was attempts made to rationalize government as a prerequisite for smoothening and strengthening public service delivery. Now, one might argue, well, because President Sirleaf wanted to bring in foreign dollars, she had the likes of Dr. Sawyer in charge of the Governance Commission. And so some of those recommendations coming out of the Sawyer Commission, the Governance Commission, were instituted. The GAC and other integrity institutions, the LACC as well. Now, fast forward to the current government, and we're not skipping or freeing the previous government out of this at all, but not much effort has been made in terms of rationalizing this structure we call government and the structure of government that we have under our Constitution that will ensure that government works for the people. We're still doing things as we did in the past. And this is a perfect opportunity. We have a president who's been around for years. He's worked in various governments. And so at the very least, there's an appreciation of the things that work and the things that don't work. And so by now, an agenda for change should be in the forefront of all that we do. An agenda for change. While we're yet to hear that agenda, the current development program we're operating on wouldn't be as efficient, wouldn't be as effective if some of the underlying defects of governance defects that we all speak about, that we've all spoken about over the years, aren't addressed. The issue of corruption is major. How much have we done in terms of addressing corruption? Even minimally instituting a framework to ensure that whoever is coming to government must pass an integrity test. Must pass an integrity test. We just recently, the president had to dismiss this fellow, Japa, from the Bureau of State Enterprises of the National Insurance Company. Japa came from a government which the president served, and was suspended for doing the very same thing. And so instituting common sense frameworks to ensure integrity in government, that's somewhere to start. that is somewhere to start. Anyone who has previously held a record, negative record of public service disrepute, should they be allowed to come back into government? Can we establish a framework to ensure that at least those people are filtered out of the process so that people coming in have a sense of commitment and diligence to duty in government? How far are we going with prosecution? The LSC's the LSCC is doing its part, but what's the commitment in terms of ensuring that those who are accused are adequately brought to law, brought to the courts, and those situations are clear as best as possible so that we're more efficient? We're more efficient. We're sending out the right signals, and that people aren't just being suspended, but they're being taken to court, and actions are being taken at the end of the day. Okay, so I agree with you, Dr. Pearson. It's a capacity issue, and that capacity gap flows at all levels of government, into society as well. Into society, in the private sector, there's capacity gaps. In government, there is huge capacity gaps as well.
Very good. So, Duke, let me come back to you. One of the things that Dr. Williams pointed out is we recycling officials who have already been cited for misfeasance or malpractice. The same people, we are bringing them back. Now, by the way, Transparency International ranks Liberia 135 out of 180 countries. We scored 27 out of 100.
I know what it meant for, or you can notice it to put him back in. What kind of man is this?
John, we hear you. Your mic is hot. We have Ahmed. Ahmed mic is not working. That's why we're moving from stage.
Continue, Mr. Eastman.
Okay. So we see our rank 135 out of 180. In the corruption perception index, we scored 27 out of 100. You know, when you get 27 grade, what it means. That indicates pervasive corruption issues. So, Duke, why are we bringing the same people back when we already know that they have questionable integrity? Duke, that's for you. We can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Yeah. I think this is a very good question, Jimmy. Dr. Willem just opined something that I thought is very, very important in our system of governance. And he made mention of Japa as an example. You see, I have always said this on this platform multiple times, and I will say it again today. What has happened is that we have not deviated from the way, and I mean the bad ways. I mean, we have now come to normalize these mediocrities as the normal way of governance, as the way to do things. And so what you saw in Japa is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where we are in the past, starting from Samuel Doe's government to date, we have now come to normalize impunity as the way forward. In other words, people are not afraid of being held into account whenever they do something wrong. People are not deterred by the laws that are on the books. In other words, all the elements that contribute to this malfeasance is present in all our people who are supposed to be looking after our interests. And by that, I mean the government. And so there is, the people for whom all of this is supposed to work, they have zero trust in the government. They do not trust the system. They don't think that the systems are meant to benefit them. And so put all of this together, it creates a culture of impunity where, you know, someone in charge of something is not afraid to embezzle it for himself. Someone in charge of money is not afraid to do whatever he wishes because he or she knows at the end of the day, he or she is going to get away with it. With that mindset, with that environment, you expect corruption to fester. You expect bad, bad behaviors to fester. So you have to look at, and again, you said something yesterday on Friday debate. I will come back to that particular point, which is all of the things that led us to where we went for the 14 years of destruction of ourselves. All those elements are present even today. We have not made any significant or meaningful changes. I remember Dr. Sawyer's governance recommendations. Those things were put in place. But what good is it to have LACC when they are toothless? What good is it when you have the agency that audit the government and put out recommendations, and those recommendations are not acted upon? So why do you have these institutions when you don't follow their recommendations? So in short, what I'm saying here is that we have not created an environment where we are doing things different than what we used to doing that is going to lead us to progress or the development. So if you look at since Ellen Johnson came about 2006, we are now in 2025. That's a sufficient amount of time that has elapsed that should have allowed us to usher in a system of governance that is going to be appreciated by the Liberian people. But unfortunately, we have not. And it doesn't seem like on the horizon there is, because what we see manifesting itself today is exactly what we saw manifested in 30, in 40 years past. So the trajectory doesn't look good, my fellow men and women. So, as sad, as unfortunate as it might sound, it is just heartbreaking to see that we are in 2025, in the 21st century, almost going to the second decade of the 21st century. And yet we are talking about putting up traffic lights in Monrovia. I mean, what happened with the $6 billion that came to Liberia when Ellen Johnson was in power? The direct investment fund that was, is somebody actually sitting to reminiscing about what has happened and what needs to be done? So really, Jimmy, I can tell you in short, Liberia is in a big mess. And, the partisans will tell you, oh, the Unity Party government is doing this, is doing that. Don't fall for it, because they are they are saying it based on their partisanship and nothing concrete for the layman in the street. Just go around Monrovia and talk to the ordinary people and ask them. I bet you, and I kid you not, they will tell you we were better off when George Weah were in power than today. And they are saying that because of what they are experiencing. So really, sometimes when I talk about this, I get so passionate about what I'm talking about, to the point where, it's just unbelievable. Look, take a trip and visit any Liberian foreign missions and see how that mission functions. Even the foreign service even its foreign service is affected by this bad governance we have back home. Foreign diplomats are using the foreign missions to siphon money from the government. They got two leases, one for themselves and one for the government. There's no sector of our governance system where there isn't rampant corruption. Liberia is not as poor as people make it to look. Liberia is just misguided and badly governed.
Yes, Dr. Duke, he says, but when we look at what the president has tried to do, looking at the fact that only 26.5% of public officials complied with the mandatory asset declarations, he suspended over 450 officials just in February. So, Dr. Pearson, I mean, we do see some moves being made by let's go to the central bank, where the central bank revealed 80 million in unauthorized expenditures between 2018 and 2023, and he suspended the central bank governor. Are we not doing the right thing? Because we do see some moves being made. What's your take?
Thank you, Mr. Eastman. I want to piggyback off of a couple of things that have been said already before I answer that. I think it was Dr. Williams who said that all of the guys in government are not without capacity, and I want to agree with that. There are some individuals in government today who are doing, I mean, to some extent, some good work. We need to acknowledge that. And I want to say thank you to them. Those like for example, the CSA boss may have his challenges, but he's doing pretty good. And I also am aware that Mo Ali, with all of his own limitations and challenges, is trying as much as he can to get that functionary up and running. So yeah, there are a few amongst the rest that are trying to do the best they can. Can they do more? Yes, they can do more. You mentioned the president's providing. You remember I mentioned that we have to know who calling the shots. We have to know who implementing. We have to know who holding people accountable. The president cannot do everything. That's one of the places I normally don't blame the president when it comes to shared responsibilities. Because if we're paying taxpayer money and people are being appointed and hired to do a piece of job by the president, they should be able to do the job. And where I will agree with the president, if people are appointed or they are employed in government and they are not doing the job, they should be dismissed based on their incompetence, and people with requisite competence should be employed. Well, this is where I have my own problem with our governance system in Liberia. It is political to the extent that governance is put on the bandwagon of political parties rather than on the bandwagon of nationalism. And you know, when the country is being run on the basis of who in my political party, you kind of slice off a big chunk of the human capacity in the country because you have that sense of division, and I think that's hurting the country. And that where Dr. Dukley comes in talking about recycling politicians. We recycle people over and over because we want to hire and appoint people based on political lines, not on a meritorious basis. And I think that's hurting our country. Before I just drop off on what I'm saying here is that, you know, Mr. Eastman, there's a difference between acquired knowledge and applied knowledge, right? And there's a difference between length of experience and quality of experience. I know someone and myself may have our degree from UL the same time, but their certificates may just be lying on the wall and it's not being applied. Now I may go out there and I may have my certificate, basically practically being applied. And these are the people who need to be looked for when we want to hire people in government. We don't want to hire people because, they went to LU alone, or because they were soup, all of us were with soup, or with SIM or PROSA, or we all from the same political party. We should be hiring people based upon what they've done with their degrees to begin with, how they have applied the education they have acquired over the years. And another thing I want to just stress here is that we made a mistake with President Boyka, thinking that the number of years of experience will equate to the quality of experience gained, which is a faulty premise. And you know, President Boyka does not have the quality of experience required for the 40 years he's proclaiming to have in government function. And I end by saying this. I think this is why it becomes imperative for our education system to begin to introduce internship as a fundamental part of our education learning process. We should have internship for our kids when they are between semesters and things. They should be able to go and do internship. We should have mentorship People should be mentored into roles. No one should be appointed as minister proper if they have not served in different functionaries of government, maybe assistant director, assistant minister, deputy ministers, before going to minister proper. Or come with that requisite, linear qualification from outside of the country. You can't just pick somebody and make them minister of a ministry when they have no, progressive professional experience in that area. And no continuing education in that area, no professional linkages in that field that they want to serve. No networking, no collaboration. They bring nothing to the table other than the fact that they belong to a political party or they graduated from soup, a membership. And I think this is what hurting our country. We need to pay more attention to that, Mr. Eastman.
Thank you. I just want to welcome our guest, Ahmed Sirleaf, who is in Monrovia, Liberia. He also is Focus on Liberia advisor on governance. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you to other panelists who have been discussing here. I'm sorry that we've had these technical issues. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, we do hear you.
Yeah. So I was here way before time, and it was unfortunate you couldn't hear me. I could hear you all in the studio. So I'm happy to be here. I've been listening, and we'll see how we can move this forward.
Thank you. Our discussion, we had already begun the discussion. We first tried to, define what public governance is, bringing it down to a level where everyone can understand. And we mentioned that these are basically government-run institutions. Now, you coming from abroad and with a bird's eye view of how our institutions are run, can you give a general assessment before we go to specifics of how do you find our public governance? What's the condition of our public governance at this point?
Yeah, the state of public service governance in Liberia.
Yes. Yeah, but that question is for our guest who just joined, Ahmed Sirleaf.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Those are two questions, I think, if I understood it correctly. I mean, if you want, and I listened to you on top of the hour when you began the discussion about what is public sector governance. And then the other question, the state of our public sector governance as a country. I think those are two separate questions because oftentimes when and it's the case here in Liberia and even in the diaspora, when we talk about public sector, people first run to institutions. Institutions are just, a minute element of what public sector governance is really. When you talk about, and I don't want to be too academic about this, but when you talk about public sector governance, it's just a whole broad swath of activities you're looking at. A system is a complex system that is put in place, functions, rules, laws, policies, and then institutions. So there are broad principles. You're looking at the public interest, the public good, the common good, that social compact between the governed and the governors, those who are governing. And then how do you sort of extrapolate and implement that social contract? You're looking at the public interest, and then public servants, and then public institutions that deliver what public servants do to deliver the common good to the people. In other words, institutions are just part of the arrangements, the complex arrangements, the policies, the rules, the laws that are organized in a way that deliver an overall agreed upon objective. Usually, it's run through a government. Just as a nation state organizing the government so that this government has a responsibility to provide certain services, to provide certain protections to its citizens in our broad terms. And so, yes, you've discussed on some of them, but I just wanted us to be careful about jumping to institutions, which is what we tend to do typically. Also, even with institutions, when we talk about institutions, people are thinking in terms of the infrastructure. That's the institution. Yes, buildings and a particular symbol of institution that we may know. If you look at education, people think of the education ministry or maybe the commission on higher education, the universities, those symbols. But it's more complex than that. Institutions also has these complex arrangements, right? Where you look at what structure, what law created that institution, what is the institution meant to do, and who are the type of people, what skill set are we asking them to have or experience to be able to drive those institutions to what end? Those are the questions. And so if you made an error in the first place in designing your institutions, you encounter all kinds of problems in trying to have those institutions deliver the common good to the people. So
Are you
we
seeing
have
that
a
as
right to do that.
sorry to interrupt you, but are you seeing that the formation of these institutions is what is partly causing the poor performance?
No, I wouldn't categorically say it that way. I mean, because it could be. I'm not here to say that all institutions that we have here in Liberia, for instance, in our public sector, are flawed, or that the foundations, are problematic. Some are problematic, but I'm not. That's not. I'm not. Painting with a broad stroke like that, because poor performance can be a function of human capital issue, human capacity issue. It could be a function of maybe people not having the right equipment to work with, the right system, the right environment to work with, what it takes to perform. It could be you have people misplaced. You hire the wrong people, put them in the wrong places. Some of what Dr. Pearson was mentioning there. So if you don't have the requisite background and training and experience, for example, then you can have performance issues. So performance is a whole different measure of institutionalism, if you want to look at it that way. It's just one aspect. But I was saying, if the institution itself was designed, the premise of it or the design of it is somehow faulty, then it's difficult to see how that institution can be effective and efficient.
Very good, because we have an old saying. People say you can't eat all the rooster in town and expect to wake up soon in the morning. So this goes to ask: do we have what it takes for effective public governance? Do we have it? And I will allow you to go. Your question to go around the room. Dr. Sirleaf will be our guest, and all the panelists. I want to encourage you to ask Dr. Sirleaf questions since he is on ground right now. But do we have what it takes to do it?
Yeah. Jimmy, I just wanted to comment on something Brother Ahmed said. I think when you talk about the governance and the systems and processes that are put in place, at the end of the day, the primary objectives of those systems and processes are meant to benefit the citizens of that nation in which those systems are put in place, isn't it? And if the answer to that, if the answer to that is yes, then how are our public sector governance doing in achieving that goal?
Well, I begin by saying you have a public purpose, right? The common good, the public good. That is the social contract, really, between citizens. That's why people go to vote. They go to the ballot and cast their vote for a particular individual who has presented themselves as someone who has what it takes to move the country forward. And then that individual then, is assisted by others, right? To do what? And the others that individual is assisted by are known as public servants. Public servants, public service. These are concepts that have very strong implications. Sometimes we don't pay attention to. They should be the person who citizens have chosen to lead. In our case, the president ought to be assisted under our law by other public servants. And these public servants ought to be people who are qualified, people who are competent, who have the experience, who understand public service to deliver the common good, the public interest, at the end of the day. So we do have people, to go back to that question, we do have people here at home and abroad, around the world, Liberians, both at home and abroad. I always say it will take all of us, the best minds of Liberians, the able Liberians, to be inclusive. Because part of an efficient and effective public institution, part of the characteristics and requirements is the institution to be democratic, it has to be an inclusive institution. What do you mean by inclusive institution? You don't measure based on political parties, for instance. You measure based on, do you have what it takes? Do you have the training, the requisite experience, the requisite education? Do you understand this sector? Do you have technical abilities? Do you have experiential abilities to deliver, to run this particular public institution? If we're able to answer those questions, then you place those public servants in those strategic institutions that we have, because they will run the processes, the functions, the laws, these administrative policies, and so on, and to be able to deliver the common good to the people. So yes, we do have people. Question is, are we leveraging the people we have appropriately, properly? No country can answer that question yes, affirmatively 100%, because of the politics, the local politics, and that happens everywhere. And it's the same thing in our case here.
Ahmed,
And finally, Cherry, I think the discussion here today, and bear with me because you are an expert in this area, so we want to learn from you. All of what you said now has taken place. We went to the poll, we elected a unity party, we got rid of the TDP party, and they are now in power. They are now in power for the last year and a half, or a little over a year, and we are trying to evaluate how the public sector governance has been working for the people that put them in place thus far. I think that's what we're trying to better understand.
so let me
Yeah,
let me add to that, so you respond more comprehensively. You made mention of the limited leveraging of capacity. It is true,
Right.
and I totally agree. Dr. Pearson alluded to the fact that capacity does exist. Capacity does exist. The government before this government had the same issue. They failed to leverage capacity that was available to them. Today, we're having just about the same scenario. There's square pegs in round holes. What, in your view, I mean, you alluded to the politics of the day, but how do we overcome this hurdle and leverage the best possible people to effectively move our government and the governance process forward? How do
Thank
we
you.
overcome?
Those are excellent questions. We first have to, in my view, disabuse ourselves of this tendency to jump into looking at administration, to the particular administration that's in office, and then we begin to scrutinize them, and we should, right? I'm not saying don't scrutinize a particular administration. What we ought to fix is the government of the Republic of Liberia. What we ought to fix is our state, our nation state, the challenges we have with public sector governance, our understanding, our civil service, and the public servant, the whole concept of public service. How is that ingrained in the minds of our young people who will be the leaders, after us, and even those who are leading now? So let's not exercise this limited mindset of saying, oh, this particular President Boakai and his administration and his ministers, his government. Yes, that's not to say let's not scrutinize the president's performance or the president's administration's performance. But in Liberia, we're quick to say the government of this person or the regime, this particular regime, instead of saying the government of Liberia. Then what are the challenges that the state has? Because if you don't fix these public sector challenges and deficiencies that we deal with, administration after the administration, it doesn't matter who you put there, you'll still have these challenges. Now, I'm not suggesting that leadership doesn't matter, because I'm a leadership, I'm trained in leadership. That's why I teach leadership, right? So leadership does matter, because it takes a leader who inspires, who drives, from one destination to the next, who drives a team, who recruits a team that's competent and able and ethical, right? So you go after talent, and hopefully you hire ethical people to accomplish the set goals. Any administration, that's the primary responsibility. Provide efficient services to your citizens, right? Be it education, be it in the healthcare sector, be it infrastructure, agriculture, road connectivity, energy and power. These are the symbols of governance that we all see all the time and talk about and allude, and then we individualize and say, this minister, this individual, that person is not doing well. It's just like you're building your house. If the foundation is not solid, it's not as strong. I mean, you can't build a tower on a faulty foundation, right? So you have to first have a foundation and to say, okay, this is my design, this is the structure of how I'm going to be operating. And then whoever else comes there, we hold them accountable, because we've laid down laws and principles and designed our institutions that are inclusive, that do not regard people's tribes, people's religion, people's political parties necessarily. Of course, I'm not naive to think that politics is not local, right? Politics is involved. People who brought you to office, you ought to accommodate them. But as a people, as a nation, there are questions, there are fundamental questions, in my view, in my observations, and what I've learned from participating in different aspects of, or Liberia's governance, or from reading and teaching from research. There are fundamental questions we haven't sufficiently answered. We haven't sufficiently designed our institutions in such a way that no matter who you put there, at least marginally, you will operate efficiently.
Thank you. Could you move the screen back a little bit so we get your whole head? There we go. All right. So as it goes around the room, I think maybe Dr. Pearson can go next. But tell us if you visited any of these public institutions, and can you comment if one is performing well in your observation?
So Jimmy, you're trying to put you say that.
But that's where the rubber meets the road.
I'll comment on that. What was the parable? You can't eat all the roosters and expect that one will crow in the morning to wake you up, right?
Yeah.
You're asking me to begin naming names. Yes, of course. I mean, I've been here going to a month now. I've visited public institutions and public officials. I've observed processes. I've asked questions. I've been in taxis. I've been on Kear. I've been, I've sat with people, local people. I've been to the market. I'm a researcher. So as a social scientist, we have a way of collecting data. You talk to, the demographics, the category of people to talk to get what information. I've been doing that because the tendency is to go right to the top and speak to the leaders, the ministers, the directors, the political heads. And then, they tell you, because they too have to defend their job. They have to present to you that they're working, they're performing. And in some cases, people are working. People are very serious about what they're doing, right? There may be challenges here and there in terms of communicating how well they're doing what they're doing, or measuring the metrics they set up to deliver certain objectives. How are they communicating that to the public? How are they measuring to understand performance? There are those gaps in my humble observation and from my vantage point, right? Because when you're not inside, you don't see everything, and so we have to be objective ourselves. We have to be honest in our when we give opinions or express views, and that's why I measured here. But yes, there are sectors that I believe are doing better marginally than others. There are sectors that could be doing well, and I don't think they're there yet. Um, Look, for instance, one area that I observe here is the electricity, because in any society, if you don't have energy, you don't have power, sustainable energy, affordable energy, and you can industrialize. You can do light manufacturing, for instance. You cannot mechanize the agricultural sector. You can provide continuous high quality healthcare delivery to the people, because you need clinics to be electrified. We all know what electricity does, right? Um, I think that sector needs reform. Now they have a new management in place. Since I've been here, there's stability in electricity supply. I've driven around. I see that the streets are lit up largely in the urban areas. Some of them are solar and so on. But what we see in other countries is, you have one government public agency that's responsible for generation of power, that's responsible for perhaps transmission of power, and then maybe you privatize the rest of it. You privatize the distribution and the marketing aspect of it, and you create competition so that you're looking for that a sustainable way of providing high quality, affordable, uninterrupted electricity and energy sources. Because then when you do that, you are cutting on overheads when it comes to public administration, when it comes to enabling the private sector, right? You're inviting foreign direct investors in the country. You're telling them that, look, there's an ease of doing business here. So that's one sector. On the one hand, they seem to be doing well, but the question I've been asking myself is, how sustainable is the consistency of electricity that I've seen in the last 3 weeks? So that's one. And then there are other areas, the obvious ones that you name some of them. They're trying to restore water supply in the urban areas. There's some work to be done there. The education sector is a big challenge, because we all know education investment in public education doesn't turn around quickly. It takes a long time to realize dividends on education. And so sometimes people are really reluctant to invest in education, for instance, in the health system, for instance. So there are physical symbols around. You look at the roads and how they're trying to connect and construct, build roads. Some of them largely not paved. They're just trying to open up corridors. Some paved, paving work are ongoing in certain corridors, but largely what I've observed is they're really just trying to do these lateral roads, open them up, just grade them to make them pliable and that kind of thing. Yes, that's good, but we as a nation, we ought to be more ambitious than that. Look, we can pave our roads. We can raise the money needed to do that kind of work. And those are the things that when we talk to our friends who are in government, sometimes they think that we are being overly ambitious, and maybe we're even being utopian, when we challenge and make these suggestions and express the level of ambition that some of us have for this country. Because not magic. We've seen other countries where they're way behind us. Now they're making progress that were way behind them, 50, 30 years behind them. Why can't we do it? We have educated people. We have people who are trained, people who have experience. We have people. But do we have the political will to go after those talents, to be inclusive in our approach? I think that's a question that is still outstanding.
Okay, Dr. Pearson, it goes to you.
Yeah, Mr. Eastman. I just want to clarify, not clarify, because the extreme Ahmed cannot be clarified. But I just want to make a point here that there is in my mind, in my opinion, there is a big difference between a governance structure and a governing structure. The governing structure impacts the governance structure depending on who is in power. So you may have the different laws, you may have the different policies and procedures, you may have the different institutions and how they are set up as a governing structure in terms of how it delivers to the people and all of that good things that Mr. Ahmed Sirleaf mentioned. But when you have a governing structure, designed by politicians who come to power, and that structure changed by everyone who come to power, because the political party is not the same, then we have a problem. And there where I think Mr. Ahmed Sirleaf, that we need to pay attention to the different governments that are in power. And this government in particular who is in power now, because they will not conform to the structures that are there. We see blatant disregard for the Constitution of Liberia. We see the House of Representatives get stagnated because of political maneuvering, and people are bold to say those things. We see people get dismissed from the Ministry of State because they're on supplemental payroll, to only find them, they're seeing supplemental payroll resurface with different names. So the governing structure is not the problem currently as we see it. The problem is with the governing structure. So the governance structure may be improved based on how well we critique the present governing structure. And that's what I want to ask you my question, sir.
Okay.
When it comes to contextualized development, this idea about taking Western concept of what development is and impose it on African country or on Liberia, as we're speaking about Liberia now, and that our budget must conform to World Bank and IMF laid down perspectives that they have for our country or for whoever taking money from them. How can we move from that trajectory and come to a point where Liberia's own development can be contextualized to our local relevance, our participatory planning of our people, cultural sensitivity, and sustainable and ownership approach in the country? I want you to speak to that, because for me, that's how our budget will get transformed.
Right. Yeah. No, I think we're saying the same thing, right? In different but similar languages. In terms of the governance structure and the governing structure, that governing is, you're talking now about this current administration in office. Are they following the governing structure? Are they the governing structure that's been laid down? Are they respecting the rule of law, for instance? Are they inclusive in how they manage institutions? Are they engaging in institutionalism? This is just what I'm hearing you say. And you raised a very important question in terms of our budget structure and process right now. Just yesterday, I was reading the budget fact sheet. It was very fascinating to see how the different sectors money are allocated to which sector, and how much money is allocated to this sector and that sector, and why. It was very interesting to see that. And given the current geopolitics that we're dealing with, right, the make America great again, if I can be specific, development assistance is going away. Development assistance, foreign aid, is not the same. It's not going to be the same again ever until this recent sort of withdrawal of basically United States government, development agency from around the world. People were calling for, saying, look, aid has a rule, but aid is not all. Aid cannot develop your country. You ought to be able to have a voice. Don't just look at these multilateral institutions and go by multilateral requirements, the coloniality of aid, that we have to go away from that. Yes, we can govern and run our country in isolation. We can't, right? The international system is a rules-based system. We are a part of that. There's that ecosystem that we are part of. That's one thing. But what I'm hearing you ask is, when are we going to assert ourselves and say, look, here are our needs, and we're going to design our budget and raise revenue based on our needs, because we want to invest in our public sector. We want to invest, in major governing structure in such a way that aligns with the needs of our people and why our people elected a particular government, right? That is the question. And until we can resolve that, there will be a challenge, because in the current system, you have over 90% maybe I'm exaggerating there a little bit, but the highest percentage of the budget goes to public administration. Okay, recurrent cost, if subsidies, grants, domestic debt, foreign debt, salaries and benefits and so on, just to run the government essentially. What do you have to run these sectors? What do you have for public investment? We look to aid, we look to goodwill, and aid and goodwill will not get us the kind of massive development that we need to move the country forward. So to transform a budget is just a law, it's a tool. We have to transform our mindset and then think about how to solve this problem of just operating with a very limited budget envelope. Why is that? With all the resources we have in this country, we talk about how the country is not poor, how the country is resource rich, and it is. But how are we understanding our resources? How are we engaging with these investors, these concessionaires that are coming to the country? Are we pushing them to refine natural resources, raw materials here? Are we pushing them to create jobs here? Are we pushing them to meet us halfway so that we have enough revenue to develop our own country? So literally, they don't extract our natural resources and take them to Europe and other places. So these are complex conversations that I began by saying we can't look at just the one administration that's in place. We looked at the CDC administration, now Unity Party. We're looking at the symptoms of the problem. Until we can go back to the foundation of the building, our budget will remain the same for the next 20 years, 30 years to come.
Okay, that last, you see, until we can go back to
until we can go back and say what are the fundamental questions here. So why can't we even get to $1 billion budget? So why do we allow concessionaires to come here to do business the same way LMC used to do business, the same way LAMCO used to do business? They just extract the raw materials, put them on vessels and take them away, right? Why is Firestone, for instance, just still extracting rubber or latex and shipping it away? Can they engage in some kind of refinement here? Can we have some basic, factories here that processes rubber, produces something, tires and slippers and flip-flops and whatnot, create job, and then beyond that, there are some other technical areas that I'm not qualified to speak to in terms of how you calculate royalties on these natural resources that have been extracted. What are the percentages that are coming to our government and why? How can we revisit that? A lot of others around the world are approaching these things differently, and we seem to just be doing business as usual. And that hasn't helped. It will not help.
While I agree with you that we probably need to make much better use of our resources, we see in West Africa what's going on today. Nations like Mali and Burkina Faso, Niger, they are taking over their resources to get a better deal. These colonial partnerships have been exploitative. So, but when we come to Liberia, we've been talking about governance, and then you mentioned the budget. Our budget, the last I looked, we were putting 60-70% on recurrent expenditure. A lot of salaries took up most of it. Doesn't the budget reflect how what a country prioritizes? Is it because, as much as you say education it takes time, but isn't that how we're going to build a future? If we don't educate our kids, what future do we expect if they're not going to be endowed with the knowledge and skills that they need to progress the country? So budget, we are constrained, but I still wonder if our priorities are in the right order.
when you look at, like I was talking about yesterday when I was looking at the budget, the fact sheet that they produced, and it represents, it's a snapshot of the entire budget, but it lays out the way I saw it organized. And I've read a budget in the past. I'm not an expert in that, but like all of us, right? You do some of the things that I do. You want to look at the budget because it's the law and it's a tool as well. The budget tells you the priority of an administration. It tells you the priority of the government, of the country. Okay, and so our budget is arranged based on various sectors and how revenue comes in and how revenue is expended. What are government obligations? What are the major recurring costs that they're dealing with? It's not just the wage bill. They do have things like subsidies, grants, that go to certain segment of our populations or institutions that are the government subsidizes. And then you look at these sectors. Now, for instance, I was surprised to see the agricultural sector is one of the least funded sectors. Right? Education is way high up there, and that's because some of the aid money used to go to education as well, a little bit more, I believe, than agriculture. Based on, I don't have the fact sheet in front of me, but you can tell that the bar chart tells you education is way up there, and agriculture is on the ground at the bottom. You ask yourself why, and then you look at various other sectors. Public administration is way up on the bar chart. If you look at how it's physically presented, and then so that's the sectoral representation. Then they break it down for you, how much money was allocated, how much has been spent, what's left, and then they go and say, okay, here's what we're getting from aid, donors are coming in, how much they're spending on what sector. And then they go county by county, how much money goes, say for instance, county service center, county development funds, the same amount for pretty much all counties, regardless of size. And then you look at, if you have concessionaires in your county, what is the social development fund that's coming from them? And then they list them according to if you're a Salamitol or you're Western Coast or whatnot, how much resources you have. That's kind of how they have it laid out. Okay.
Not to cut you out, Mr. Sirleaf, not to cut
Yes,
you
sir.
out. Let's look more prescriptively. Having spent, you say you've been in Monrovia now for over a month. What in terms of recommendations as far as governance and whether it's economic, basic service delivery, education, health, looking at the global structure of government, what would you say might be the most pressing concerns at this point that could help this government and subsequent governments move forward? I mean, if you could name and explain and detail one or two areas of immediate concern that needs addressing and that could help improve governance at every level of the country.
Thank you. I don't want to be presumptuous, because sometimes people you give recommendation, and I'm very humble by that question, and sometimes it comes off as you are trying to give directives or instruction to people who know what they're doing. But geopolitics has changed. All of us know that the global politics, multilateral institutions are struggling. For instance, the United Nations right now is struggling with the reform because a lot of the donor countries led by the United States have withdrawn. They're either withdrawing membership, they're canceling funding. And so you have organizations that used to give money to southern countries, the regions, they themselves are struggling to survive. They're merging some of the UN agencies and funds and things like that. Those are the kinds of conversations that are happening at a multilateral level, right? And so our government, in my view, ought to be aware and engaged with those kinds of conversations because since we do not exist in isolation, we have international relations and foreign policy, and there are those who are driving that policy. We ought to be engaged and to understand the context, the broader global context, because no foreign policy is effective unless that foreign policy is pegged on domestic policy, national strategic interests. So what are our national strategic interests? They will tell you everything in Liberia is a priority. And that's true, right? I mean, you look at education, we can go and look at health, we can do any sector. Social policy, any sector here is a priority, is urgent. But as a government, the responsibility is, to steward and provide stewardship for the resources and the country and provide direction to your people. And that's what I see them trying to do here. But in terms of what I see from my vantage point, when you observe and you read stuff, you read papers, government papers, maybe coordination of these sectors could be improved, and how what benchmarks have they set for performance, and how are they measuring those? And I know they have a performance instrument that was developed a few months ago, and that's in place. How is that being implemented? How is that effective? Because one thing to have policy, you have good policy prescription and implementation. Now, how do you conduct the two? And how do you identify gaps and strength, and then leverage where your strength is to see how to address the gaps? Some call it intra-government communication, some call it strategic communication, communicating with the public and the citizens as to what the government is doing and why. So on the periphery, from my vantage point, these are some observations I've made. But every major sector here, the country, we came from war a long time ago now, but we're still struggling with some basic social services, some basic infrastructure issues, some basic public sector investment questions. We're still grappling with them. You enter the country, you land here, you know that you are in a very challenged environment, very challenging governance environment, from ethical standpoint, from just work ethic standpoint, from how people see public service, and how people bring themselves and show up as public servants. All of these are very challenging mindset and a mental model issues that I think are hampering the actual substantive things that we need to be doing. I know it's a non-answer to a very serious question.
We will take a quick break now. We're almost at the hour. Let's just take a station break.
Now we're going to take calls from local, right?
Yeah, in studio. Ask Mohammed during the break. Ask if he's prepared to take calls.
Okay, because the interaction with the folks here, I think, would be important. Thank you.
Yes, George. George, are you there?
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
At Focus on Liberia.
And we are back. Were you able to get a studio on?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
George, are you there?
We lost Ahmed for a minute.
Let's just continue. Let's continue.
Yeah, we'll just continue. So
we probably can move on to Dr. Pearson with the same question. Be prescriptive. What major areas, one or two, you imagine government could focus on in terms of strengthening? I like the idea of the structure and the processes, the governing you speak of. That makes a lot of sense. How can we improve the delivery process? In essence, the structures, are those structures rationalized to address the issues of the nation that we have, given our gaps, and taking into consideration the global context. A lot has changed and is changing globally. How are we adapting to that process, so much so as to more efficiently affect the governing process? And thanks for the distinction, Dr. Pearson.
I think that's a brilliant question, Dr. Williams. I think that's a brilliant question. And the reason I say that is because the whole idea with the shifting geopolitical structure right now, like we see in the United States with the whole thing about Trump and Elon Musk trying to cut government and reduce the size of federal government and put more matters in the hands of the states. It speaks to similar issues we have in Liberia. What we're talking, I remember from the time Ellen was in power, we've been talking about decentralization. That's the same concept. It's like taking power from in the hands of central government and makes it more localized at the county level. What that does for Liberia is that it brings development to the local level. It takes people from a central point and disperses them across the country. It makes the entire country livable and developmental, rather than concentrating everything in Monrovia, in the capital city. And so what I would say to the question, which is a very loaded question, Mr. Williams, is that, look, Liberia, we need to reassess our entire governance structure. Our governance structure right now is bloated, very bloated. We have so much redundancy in institutions and in policy frameworks, right? We need to have an expert of Liberians, whether pro bono or paid or through consultancy, or if you don't even want to use Liberians, then use a firm, and a development firm, with expertise in national development, strategic planning, whatever the case is, and map up the entire governing institutions in our country. What are the structures that are there? Look, our constitution alone, the constitution of Liberia, is faulty. It's faulty. It's premised on a military influence, a military regime, junta regime influence. It was concocted by an imposition of rules and regulations that were in favor of a junta administration. How can we effect change in the constitution to begin with? What are institutions that were relevant 10 years ago but not relevant today? What are the duplicity of public institutions in the country? I am the big fan, Dr. Williams, of this concept, that idea we have about autonomous agency that are holding key revenue generating arm of our country but cannot account for our budget financing for national development. I am totally against that. I've heard people tell me and say, Dr. PSC, it doesn't work like that because they wanted to be how Tubman did it or how Toribot did it. They had these patronage organizations called NPA, LPRC, Maritime, that the money generated that went into individual pockets. And few Liberians sit on boards of directors and determine how the money is spent. When the country cannot even generate a budget envelope of $1 billion, institutions are making close to $1 billion behind the scene and are not accounting for it. How can we scrap some of these things? How can we read? And maybe Mr. Sirleaf can speak to how can we go back on the drawing board and reassess the laws, the policies, and the institutions? How can we, within the space of like Dr. Sirleaf mentioned, multilateral institutions are struggling for finances to even fund international donor funding. How can we narrow down government to improve on our delivery aspect of things? Invest heavily in agriculture. And Mr. Sirleaf, let me say this: our national budget does not support agriculture. It supports administrative function in agriculture ministry. Agriculture actually is funded by USAID and other funding partners on the side of things. And even the money they put on the side to fund agriculture in actual terms, direct investment, Dr. Williams, those same monies are run after and sought after by legislators, government ministers who got funds. and they go because they got the full knowledge of this funding coming. They go and prepare proposals more stringent and more valuable than the proposal of our local farmers, and they get the money, and the local farmers do not get the money. These are fundamental problems in our country, and we need to fix them.
Thank you for that, Dr. Pearson.
Pearson?
We're
Yeah.
go ahead, ask your question, Dr. Williams.
No, just commending him for his response to that question. I think I couldn't agree with you more. There is an urgent need to rationalize the structures we have, institutional disalignment, to ensure that those structures, as far as our national budget is concerned, are in the position to contribute their quota within their means in an effective and efficient and transparent way. Because as it stands, a lot of these institutions are unaccountable, not unaccountable to the people, unaccountable to the government, and there is a need for a revisit of those structures. Mr. Ducler, let's let it flow around before we go back to Mr. Sirleaf as we reached our end mark. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Dr. Pearson eloquently lay out some of the ills, and also Brother Sirleaf was talking about governance in terms of systems, but I think it's necessary that we view this system through the lens of the government of the day, because all the ills that we talk about and all the discrepancies, the lack of capacity, in my opinion, after almost about 30 years since the cessation of hostility, I don't think we should be where we are. We should have been very far ahead in laying out the foundation that would have taken this country to a better place than where it is now. And I've always said it here on this very platform that, look, each and every president who comes to power set the agenda of his or her government. And then his minister and his lieutenants follow that agenda. And so this is where I have some problems with, for example, the caliber of people that have been appointed to carry out the government's agenda, the so-called rescue agenda, as an example. And before that, we had the pro-poor agenda that was preceded this one. So, in order to contextualize all of these things and how they are going about doing it, you cannot leave out the government of the day in terms of implementing and carrying out all these things, because at the end of the day, there's one critical component in government, which is accountability and transparency. You can't, that these two elements go hand in hand, because it simply means you want to see where your dollars are spent and who is spending your dollars. Now, are you getting your dollars worth? So you can, and you can only do that through the lens of the government of the day. And so when you are looking at these governance structures that are supposed to be in place, we have not put in place governance that is going to yield the outcome we all expect. It reminds me of the famous statement of Professor Lumumba when he said, we have the tendency of electing thieves, knowing that they are thieves, and we expect for them to be noble. I mean, you can't have it both ways. So when we're talking about governance, always, as much as people like to say, the institutions and not the institution, but in our case, post-war country, in our case where the entire nation is traumatized, and we were bashing the previous regime as how bad they were and how they were only benefiting few of the citizenry. And now we have the opportunity to turn that around. And after 30 years, we are still talking about Liberia acceptance. We just came from the war. I mean, I don't think that is an acceptable excuse. But it speaks to the kind of leaders we have had. and the people who have been in charge of the government, because now they deem it necessary to justify to themselves that whatever they are doing, they are actually entitled to these things. They are actually supposed to get them because it is now their turn to enjoy Liberia, or to do whatever. So that mindset, that mentality, we should have worked on changing that mentality from the get-go through our learning institutions, through our communities, you name it. But I applaud you as a social a social researcher in those areas, and maybe you can help us with a roadmap. Maybe that can put us on that right path. But as things stand right now, every sector of the Liberia government is a complete mess. And so the few individuals who are there who mean well, who are actually doing their best, they are limited as to what they can do because they are surrounded by sea of corruption, sea of you name it, all the malfeasances that's supposed to be avoided. So and I was talking to Dr. William earlier. We are all in our 50s. So if you really calculate it, 30 years of people my age just wasted with absolutely nothing. They can't show nothing they have done with 30 years of their lives. And yet we are still talking about it as if to say, we just came out of the war yesterday. No, it's been 3 decades, if not more. So sometimes when you talk about these things and you look at neighboring countries and the way things are done there, it wasn't long ago we're talking about dialysis machines. I mean, really? Dialysis machine? But hey, that is the reality that we find ourselves in. This is what we have. This is what our leaders have put us through. And so we cannot extract what we expect from what we did not sow. So what is the way forward? Certainly, what we have now is not the way forward. But then, how do we get to that path where we say, okay, we are now on a path that is going to yield some development for us and for everyone who is interested to see Liberia do well?
Mr. Sirleaf, thank you, Mr. Duclair. Mr. Sirleaf,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Duclair just spoke, and as we wrap up, just spoke to the whole idea of this 35 years.
Yeah.
It's been 35 years. Do the 35 years speak to hold on. Do the 35 years speak to how we've underestimated the damage to the country, not just to infrastructure, but the damage to the people that continues to afflict us in the manner and form that we're experiencing in our governance process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you too for two of you for those questions. Conflicts conflicts are bad for the obvious reasons, right? It's easier to destroy the infrastructure, and it's easier to build the infrastructure, to rebuild the physical infrastructure that were decimated during a conflict period. But what research shows is that what is neglected is the destruction done to the social fabric of society, including the mindset of the people, the division that were propagated during the conflict, and the hatred that were promoted during the conflict. The root causes of the conflict still exist in this country. And yeah, you're talking about 35 years. People who are in their 50s now, 35 years, 30 years gone of their lives. What about the lost generation? You have young people who were born during the conflict, some of them in the late 2000s, some of them were born in the 1990s. These are folks that are in their mid-20s and so on now, who should be, coming out of college and young professional, the sort of cadre of young professionals who are heading to their primes, right? They're heading, uh, but unfortunately, because of what happened and the neglect of the social side of the reconstruction work, the neglect of the people side, uh, we are still struggling in accepting ourselves, in working together. We're still struggling in educating our children who were born in the 90s, who were born in the late 2000s, in the mid 2000s. Okay? So you have a young person who maybe when you listen to them talk, um, the sentences and verb and subject don't add up, but they're doing something. They're trying very hard to be professional, to support their country, to have a decent life. But then they're either poorly educated or not educated at all. And then you don't have these, maybe now they're coming online, during the presidential administration, the TVET, and there were different initiatives. And at that time I worked here for USA, so we were part of funding some of those activities, the vocational training and so on for young people who were not prepared academically, to go certain academic routes, to have opportunities for trade and skills building. But the point is, when conflict happens, it destroys more than the infrastructure. And typically people are focusing on rebuilding the bridges that were destroyed, rebuilding the buildings that were burned down, trying to bring the electricity back, which those are all important, but also reconciling the population and addressing the mental mindset that, listen, we should be loyal and patriotic to our country. We are one people, regardless where you come from, whatever language you speak, what linguistic orientation is your tongue or your people come from. We're all Liberians. How you worship your God, we're all one people. That aspect to me was neglected and is showing up in how we publicly administer our public sector and how we build and nurture our institutions, how inclusive or not inclusive our institutions are. And so you can see that the soft aspect of reconstruction, if it's not done well, it impacts the hard, the infrastructural aspect of it. And so I think that there's a challenge there. We always talk about impunity, right? Addressing impunity. And we talk about rule of law, because security, justice, rule of law, that's one pillar. That's really one sector, okay? These all have to do with perception and mindset. If someone doesn't fully believe that they're here for the sake of public service, they're here for self-service, you can't convince them to be patriotic, to work for country, sincerely and honestly and ethically. It's difficult. And so there are those soft aspects that we still have to grapple with as we try to build the country itself. Dr. Williams, in my view, and research I've done here and things I've observed, and I've taught here for years, interacting with different sociological groupings in our country. The mindset is what's troubling. I mean, look at mob violence, for instance. If someone can set a whole vehicle on fire just because an accident occurred, maybe there was equipment failure or human error, someone died, someone's property got damaged, the instinct is to burn that vehicle, to burn and kill that driver. These are the kinds of things we're dealing with.
Yeah, that I would just chime in on all the things all you guys said. I like Dr. Pearson's beginning when he said, well, first of all, the document we say is our engendered law, the Constitution. That was not made for a progressive republic. There's something wrong with it. And if you have something as essential as that, your Constitution, not a progressive Constitution, not a Constitution that will help nurture and grow nationalism, patriotism, and our it's not going to help. Okay, so it is apparent that we need to go back to the drawing board. When I say go back, at the same time, you're going to have to be building the plane while flying it. But you have to go back and address the fundamental things that make up the nature, especially the pillars upon which all nations rely: education, okay, rule of law, okay, and agriculture, to be the ability to feed oneself. We have to address these things from inception, because things are not the way they before. When the war took place, well, let's go back to 1980, because you guys mentioned 35 years. 1980 ushered in people who felt they were disenfranchised. They were taken advantage. It wasn't about they being educated or knowing how to do the job, but it was their chance to have public access to. There never came a time where we said, okay, that time is that era has passed. We have moved those people now. Let's start rebuilding the nation. That has not taken place. We saw it a little bit in Ellen initial term.
6 years. Yeah.
You know, we saw that, but it has stopped, and now we're still hearing echoes of our time to eat. You know, that thing still resonates in my mind. Like, our time to eat, is that the approach? That's not a leadership. It's leaders eat last. It was the last time I checked. So, what do you? One more time, Mr. Sirleaf. Do we need to go back to the drawing board and rewrite, reconfigure, rethink our institutions?
Yeah, I think the Constitution is the foundation of all institutions, because that's the foundation of the progressive republic, right? Our Constitution is one of the, if not the most racist Constitution. We still have the New Growth Clause in the Constitution, and that is depriving the country of needed resources, right? Anyone who comes here knows that most of the fancy places and functional places we have here are run by people who don't look like us, be they Lebanese, be they Indians, Syrians, and you name it. They run the best hotels in the hospitality the sector. Yeah. So what do? They don't have a stake in the country. They take the money away to their home countries or other third countries. So that's an area that we have to address. Additionally, we all know the 1986 Constitution, on the circumstances under which that Constitution was crafted, right? This was a military regime. It was a very militarized environment. So this is not the law that truly reflects who we are, who we ought to be, and who we could be. And we've attempted several times to revisit the Constitution, to do referenda. There have been different attempts, but I think that we haven't fully addressed these fundamental questions that don't resemble, like you said, progressive republic. Yes, and institutional arrangements and realignment. I remember when I worked here between 2012 and 2018, when Dr. Sawyer was alive in the Governance Commission. He was chair of the Governance Commission. That commission was very active, examining institutions, examining our arrangements, our institutional arrangements, our governance structure and governance structure that's going to appears in there. And some of the results are these integrity institutions we have around here to place some checks and balances in places. But we still didn't fully arrive there where we ought to have gotten in order to truly help the country to move forward. You see legislations, laws dealing with decentralization, deconcentration, the Local Government Act, moving the Ministry from Internal Affairs to local government, those structures all came from that Sawyer era governance commission work, an attempt to readdress and realign some of these foundational issues and institutional arrangements. So that tells me that we still have questions to answer, foundationally, that will help us to move forward when it comes to who runs and who we hire and how we attract talents to include everybody in the governance.
Okay, we up for time now. I will like you to do your closing, Ahmed, and
Well,
maybe.
yeah, quickly, I just want to thank all of you and our listening audience there for your patience. Obviously, they noticed that I was now on the show for a whole hour because we encountered some unexpected technical challenges here. So I was not able to be heard in studio, and so hence my joining the show late. I apologize for that. People were texting me and calling. But I'm also grateful for the opportunity to have come and participated in this conversation towards the end of it. So thank you all.
Thank you. And to our listening audience, we come on every Saturday at 2:00 p.m. Monrovia time. Join us again next week, and we will be bringing you another guest. And of course, we'll be talking about nothing else but Liberia. So until that time, we must keep this one concept in mind. We are all Liberians. We all need to be headed in the same direction. Thank you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.